no doubt we will talk about the weather, I'm sure, Louise. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning if you are joining us live on LinkedIn. And good morning if you're joining us on YouTube. Yes, we were talking about the weather, but how could we not, right, in this crazy heat wave that we've had? Is it El Nino or is it something else? I can't remember. It's a band of high pressure or something, right?
About the wind coming in this way, blowing in this direction.
Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah. But you were saying you love the sun, right? So do you love it really hot, like really hot, hot, hot?
Yeah, so this is so funny because I told you about my family party that I went to, and we were doing a and one of the questions was like, what is your ideal like temperature? And mine is like a good like 27 degrees with sun. That's like my ideal day.
Okay. Wow. 27 and sunny is your ideal day. Okay. Good morning, Adrian. Aransa, how are you doing? I'm guessing, Adrian, you're down in Cornwall on the coast. I'm guessing you guys have had some scorching weather. But what's your ideal? Maybe that's the opening question. What is your ideal weather? So Louise's is 27 degrees and sunny. Yeah, 27's not bad actually. I'm probably around sort of like similar. I think anything above 30 and it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable. And obviously we got up to like nearly 35, right? This week, I think we got up to 35, muggy in Cornwall. I can imagine. I can absolutely imagine. Yeah, it's today. I mean, we've got a lot of cloud cover here, so even though it's still relatively warm, but we've got a lot of cloud cover. But it's interesting to see. The one thing I like about the sun is it kind of puts everybody in a good mood. Do you agree with that, Louise?
Everyone's so much nicer.
Yeah.
Like I was saying yesterday how I was out getting survey results, and like people are just at first people were very hot, so some people were a bit like tensiony, but most people when they're out in the sun they're just like, yeah, I'll do it, I'll chat to you, and it's just such nice
vibe. Makes people more sociable. Yeah.
It's such a great day to do it. Like, well done. Like, what a good day to come out and speak to people. I was like, thanks.
Yeah. That's amazing. And Jason, it's been a while since I've seen your morning on Wagwan family. Hey, Jason. Louise, do you know Jason?
I don't know Jason, no.
Okay. I thought you might have known Jason. Jason, what's your ideal weather? What is your ideal weather? Louise said hers is 27 and sunny. What's yours, Jason? What's your ideal weather? And I must say as well, because I had a family member over from the Caribbean, from Jamaica, and I said to her, it's hotter here than Jamaica. I think she brought the sunshine. Adrian says, I'm with Louise, 27 sunny with a breeze near the sea, with a cocktail or a mocktail. That just sounds perfect, Adrian. Let's manifest that this Friday morning. Sylvia, good morning, Sylvia. How are you doing? Sylvia, what's your ideal weather? I'm loving to what is your ideal weather? Definitely I'm with you, Louise, in terms of like how the sun puts people in a good mood. I was doing a workshop in March it was, and it was an unusually sunny day. And so when people came in for the workshop, they were in such a good mood. Like people had cycled into work and all kinds of things. Yeah, puts everybody in a good mood. So hence why you've got myself and Louise. Louise is feeling the sun. You've been out getting survey results, right, this week?
Yeah.
Speaking to the Gen Zers. I'm curious as to how you know whether somebody is definitely Gen Z.
Right. So this is so funny. So I went to like Victoria Park, like the next to Embankment Station, because it's like near UCL, near King's Cross, Somerset House.
Yeah.
So I'm just like scanning people and just going up to groups. I'm like, you look in the age range. So I straight up go up to people and I'm like, can I ask you a question? They're like, okay. They're like, all right. I'm like, how old are you generally? And sometimes they're like, oh, like 25, 20, whatever, 20. And then, but like, unusually, quite a few groups yesterday were like in my mid-30s. And I was like, oh, okay. And they were like, why? How old did you think I was? And I was like, well, in my age range that I'm asking for this survey. And obviously some people take it as a compliment. Because I'm like, okay, well, you're 28. So
Yeah. And that's the thing. So Jason has said 27 degrees, blue sky and fluffy clouds. Oh, I love that. Yeah, blue sky, deep blue sky. 27. So just for anybody that doesn't know, and I am going to introduce Louise on here properly, even though Louise has been on a LinkedIn Live before. And some people may know Louise from the work that she does, or any of like your speaking events or whatever. But what is the age range? In fact, let's ask people in the comments. Let's ask people in the comments to tell us, how old are Gen Z? So we're going to be talking about Gen Z today, or Gen Z, if you want to say it like that. Louise is a Gen Zer. What is the age of a Gen Z? Do it without asking Claude, and I will. I'm gonna. That's the challenge. Do it without asking Claude. I'm gonna read your bio, Louise, that Claude has kindly written for you.
Oh, okay.
Today, and then you get to score Claude out of 10. So Louise Lyons-Appiah is the co-founder of Synkora Consulting, the first youth-led EDI training and consultancy, and also of Breathe Uni, a mental health, personal development and equality organisation working across UK universities and beyond. A facilitator and speaker with deep expertise in intersectionality, identity, and inclusive culture, her work spans corporate, education, and community settings. She brings both professional expertise and personal experience to this conversation, including navigating imposter syndrome, racial trauma, and gender equality in her own career. Louise, welcome back.
Thank you. I haven't
That's
had my
what
out in a while, so I was like, okay.
How did Claude do? Marks out of 10.
Yeah, pretty good. I'm solid 9.
Amazing. We haven't got any guesses yet on the age range of Gen Z. Let's start with the lower end. Because I think it's the top end that people sometimes struggle with. So what's the youngest? Because some people now have started talking about Gen Alpha, right, which comes after Gen Z. Yeah. So how old is Gen Alpha? So Gen Alpha is like up to what age? Where does Gen Alpha stop and Gen Z starts?
Up to like 13, 14 years old.
Okay.
Gen Z starts at around 14.
Okay, so Gen Alpha aren't yet in the workplace, right? Because they're early teen, like tweens almost, like, yeah.
The oldest Gen Alpha is like going to do their GCSEs soon, but like doesn't care place at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell you what, I mean, that's going to be the thoughts even of like Gen Alpha in the workplace. I mean, it's I don't even want to get there. Yeah. There's not many people guessing the upper age limit. I think I probably know this because I believe my daughter was born in the final year for Gen Z. So my daughter was born in 1997.
Yeah.
Which I believe is a cutoff, right, for Gen Z. So typically, what does that mean? 28, I want to say?
28, yeah.
28, or maybe about to be 29. Yeah. Okay, so in case you didn't guess, 28, 29. I tell you what, you Gen Zers are getting older.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Those people are like, are very proud Zillennials. Like the 29-year-olds, they're like, yeah, I'm a Zillennial. I'm
Zillennial. I've not even heard that term, Zillennial. Okay, because they're between the Gen Z, on the cusp of Gen Z and the millennials. I mean, I love all of this generational talk. I actually went to an event a few weeks ago with my daughter, who is, as I say, like towards the top end of Gen Z. But what was really nice about it, they split the room into the generations. In fact, the first task was, are you sitting on the right table for, whether you are Gen X, millennial, slash sort of Gen Y, a boomer, for example. And, it's really funny just sort of seeing whether people could even get their generation right. So, so you are about to, you're in the throes of like gathering some like new research. Tell us why you wanted to do research into Gen Z and the future of work.
I think it's, I guess, personal in the sense that being in the Gen Z generation, like just generally speaking to my friends about the job market, speaking to my siblings, just people I know in general, like there's so many conversations. And I think particularly with AI and like that being such a big part of our lives and coming into the workplace, and even just like being that generation, like post-COVID, who kind of started at university or in the workplace during this time. Like there's been so many unique things that we've gone through as a generation. But also last year, going to different events and just hearing it become so much more of a topic that people were interested in talking about. Like I went to Anthropy last year, which is kind of a gathering of different organizations, people who are interested in like the biggest problems that Britain is facing. And like part of the tagline of Anthropy last year was kind of 5 generations in the workplace. And I think, me and Tanya, my co-founder, we were just having such interesting conversations with people about what that was like and how we needed to accommodate for each other, but particularly with Gen Z being the youngest generation in the workplace. And I think having certain characteristics of, like even, for example, just work-life balance and flexible working being the biggest thing that Gen Z are expecting from the workplace, because after COVID, that is what everyone kind of switched to. And Gen Z are like, oh, we're not really going back to 5 days in the office because that's wild and that's not what we're used to and that's not something that we expect. So that's sort of that aspect. I also spoke at an event last year as well around generational burnout, because there were lots of reports last year and this year as well about burnout in the workplace and how Gen Z are actually the most affected. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're the most burnt out generation in the workplace, and which I think some people might be quite surprised by.
Well, or do you think some people are going to be like, oh, it's because they're snowflakes? Do you know what I mean? Is there that that perception of, oh, they just can't hack it? Do you know what I mean? Like, which is potentially quite unfair, right?
Yeah, for sure. And even like it was a couple of years ago now that I actually spoke on Sky News about Rishi Sunak's comments around the sick note generation and how, again, Gen Z were the most likely to take time off work due to like, mental health sickness, and how the workplace also doesn't accommodate for that really. And people don't necessarily feel comfortable to say that they're taking time off work due to poor mental health. And so that, there's lots of different narratives around burnout and what that looks like. And some people are like, well, surely boomers or, Gen X would be the most burnout generation because they've got, more positions of power or leadership. But actually, like, if you think about what they've been used to in the workplace, like their kind of stress levels have kind of like evened out or gotten used to that kind of way of working. And that's also like the mindset of that way of working is kind of ingrained. Whereas if you're not used to that or you're not expecting that, then that's where the burnout can come from as well.
Right. So do you think then there is an issue around, for example, because there was a couple of things that you said there. First of all, around maybe expectations. So is there a mismatch potentially between the expectations of Gen Zers going into the workplace and then the reality? And then the other thing you said is, as a generation, and this is, you're absolutely right in terms of having to go through things like COVID, being quite a disruptive feature in actually what is a very critical time for sort of development, especially mental health development, actually, then to have to go through COVID and then going into early careers at a time when a lot of people are working from home and all of this sort of thing. It's maybe, as I'm saying, I'm thinking we're asking a lot of Gen Z, right? Without having given, without you necessarily having had like the skills, the being around other adults and like sort of almost like figuring out how to navigate those spaces. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. What are your thoughts? Is there an issue around expectation gap? So maybe our workplaces maybe expecting too much or different things of Gen Z, and then that thing around how do Gen Z, get the skills given that they have had these disruptive kind of factors, sort of at quite an early stage in their career and their development.
Yeah, I mean, not to give too much away, but even doing the survey, clear expectations is one of the questions we put about like what's most important to you from the workplace, and that was one of the top 3.
Really?
more about what people want from the workplace and not feeling like they have those clear expectations.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very much this is kind of how it is. We're aware that you kind of have different needs or different wants from the workplace, but we don't feel like that's what we need to give you, especially in the more corporate world. And I think that's where the problem lies, especially when there's such different expectations, but also the people with different expectations have the least power when it comes to being part of creating that culture, which I think is a massive part of the problem. It's so hierarchical in nature. Even when you have organizations that attempt to do kind of more flat hierarchies, it still always ends up being, again, people with the most experience or people with the most perceived experience and power. So it can be very, very difficult to kind of shift that culture and shift those changes to allow, not for the culture to change in Gen Z's favor, but more people can kind of be more authentic with how they bring themselves to work and kind of more flexible, and the workplace is generally more accommodating for different people's needs and expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've just been joined by another Gen Zer, Junior Beeman. Well, he looks like a Gen Zer. Anybody that's met Junior Beeman in real life would absolutely think he was a Gen Zer. He says, "Happy Friday, Oprah and friends." So we're joined there by Junior Beeman. And I want to delve into and it's so timely that Junior should join us as well. I want to talk about authenticity, because some people are great at doing some people are great at being authentic and have kind of figured out a way of just being themselves. I actually think when I reflect on my own experience, actually, I know that when I hit 40 in particular, I was like, this is me. Do you know what I mean? It was there was a moment of kind of it felt easier to be myself, right? And I think there is something about that. Let's talk about, I've got a view that Gen Z are probably the most authentic in the workplace. I think they just show up and it's just literally just take it or leave it. I don't know whether that's something you'd agree with, Louise.
Yeah, I think so. And I honestly do think that's something to do with social media. Just the fact of just being the chronically online generation, where you're just you're seeing so many different versions of people. And even if you're deep into workplace TikTok or workplace Instagram reels, I just think there's so many different people that are experiencing similar patterns of behavior. Someone's emailed their boss or something wrong or something like that. Or I think there's so many people authentically expressing who they are on social media. You kind of feel more empowered to do the same. If you're literally millions of people just being themselves, and you have hundreds of different role models, I think it can make you feel it can empower you in a different way, because it's actually what the world is. If you are online, if you spend 6 hours a day online, that's your reality actually, and everything else is kind of a different sort of reality.
I love that. I mean, first of all, what I'm going to say now, I'm going to sound like a right boomer, right? And I'm not a boomer, but I have no idea what work TikTok or work Instagram are. But I think what you said there in terms of people sharing, for example, I got this email from my boss and it said X, Y, and Z. I think you're right in terms of that kind of encourages people to share some of the positives, but also, let's be honest, some of the madness that goes on in the workplace, right? People will know The Devil Wears Prada 2 film is out, and I would encourage you, if you've got any interest in leadership styles in particular, because I actually think that The Devil Wears Prada is more a study actually in leadership styles, right, and authenticity. And there are some Vogue interviews out now at the moment with some of the real assistants, right, of Anna Wintour. And there's a part of me that's I'm not surprised. A lot of Gen Zers wouldn't stand up for this nonsense. That what happened 20 years ago in terms of how those individuals were treated in those like what I say called junior roles. A lot of Gen Zers absolutely would not stand for it, or they'd be on TikTok being like, can you believe what my boss asked me to do? Do you know what I mean? But back then there wasn't the social media to kind of, you know, out this nonsense kind of behaviors like from leadership, right? So I just think it's really interesting. Sylvia's got here. It makes sense that they are affected. A young generation entering a workplace right after COVID, the nervous system dysregulation is high. Plus, they are the generation which has grown up with social media, right? And the impact that has on identity and self-worth. Definitely. I love what you said about the impacts of social media and authenticity. I think it's really, really interesting. Good morning, Yam. How are you doing? Junior. Junior, you always say this about me. So this is, I always say about Junior being authentic, but after 6 schools and coming out at 15 years old, ain't nothing and no one stopping me being me. Junior, we love that.
Yes. And I do think that's like when you've had certain experiences in life, that makes you feel more unstoppable or feel like more like you.
Yeah.
Like I always say, like I was speaking to like someone in Gen Z, but she was also a mother, and I was like, that is like top tier level of audacity and confidence, because I feel like once for someone who has kids, for example, it's like, oh, I've just like had kids, so like,
what can you tell me?
What can you tell me? And yeah, if you have like, I think traumatic experiences or experiences that like shape you and make you more of a resilient person.
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 ways to go about it. You can have more imposter syndrome, but there can also be the opposite effect where you just kind of feel like I've got nothing to lose, and I've already this and this. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Junior says here, we're saving PDFs, not lives. Right? I might get that put on a t-shirt. We're saving PDFs, not lives. I want to come back to you. You said something about work-life balance, so what we hear a lot of is, and I've got a view about this, and I talk about, you know, people will know when I start to talk about working from home and putting your Zoom cameras on and all of this nonsense, right? Which I'm very happy to say with my chest, right? But there are quite mixed messages around about what does or doesn't work for people in the different generations and at different life stages and at different parts of career. So just talk to me about Gen Z and the expectation around hybrid working, flexible working, working from home, etc. What in your experience, what are Gen Z looking for, and or what do they need?
Definitely the flexible working.
Okay.
And I think obviously, like, I don't know if you saw Emma. Is it Emma Grade?
Emma Grade.
That's how you say her last name, right? And obviously the controversial stuff that she's been saying about how people need to be in person in order to stand out and get that promotion and whatever it is. But just because that is maybe the expectation of the corporate workplace, that doesn't mean that people are going to be able to do that or want to do that. And I think the expectation is that you should have flexible working, whatever it is, 2 days, 3 days, work in these different ways in these teams. But if that's the expectation, then the workplace should be able to be like, okay, well, how do we still understand and gauge our employees and still have, you know, deep personal relationships with them, professional relationships with them, in order to understand how they fit into the organization, not just like, okay, well, if someone doesn't come in 5 days a week, then they're not going to get this promotion. Because they're still speaking. Like, I was literally speaking to a group of girls yesterday when I was doing my survey. They were like, talking about, oh, well, today, obviously, it's such a hot day. I'd rather be working from home. But like, I'm going to be speaking to you guys on Teams anyway. Like, it's not like I'm going to be doing something else. I'll just speak to you on Teams, and it's great. And we love our Teams chats and our little like Teams group chats. So I think there's ways around it. It doesn't have to be in person.
What's interesting, and I know that I think I'm right in saying that. Am I right in saying that Gen Z are sometimes referred to as like digitally native, digital natives, right? So there's something about you know, when it comes to technologies like, you know, Zoom or Teams and other things like, you know, WhatsApp or, you know, social media, etc., maybe there is something around, you know, potentially Gen Z are better able to navigate communication and connection across different channels, possibly better than those of us that aren't in that, you know, aren't sort of digital natives. It's interesting to me, even as you know, when we started talking, so before we went live, and I was asking you about the surveys, and I didn't realize you were going to be doing them in person, even though I think you had mentioned that before when we spoke about it. I guess in my mind, I was expecting that you would have done it like mainly online, which actually is what I tend to do with surveys. But you were out on stopping people on the street, like, you know, that in-person thing, which, you know, as I say, people have got these stereotypes. For example, the stereotype of Gen Z that they like prefer to be stuck behind a keyboard, etc. But you were out stopping people, having conversations, and it probably links to what you were saying about the flexibility. Do you know what I mean? Like flexibility as being the desire rather than necessarily being one thing or the other, right?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that, like, even though I was in person speaking to people, at the same time, I was getting content of me being in person so that I could post that on social media.
That is so Gen Z.
And people are just so used to it as well. Like, because my partner was like filming me, but like I just don't care. Like he's like, oh, how are you feeling? Are you feeling like nervous or anything? And I was like, I feel way more nervous walking up to someone and asking them a question than I do filming in public. Like I will do anything. I was holding my sign. I don't care. I will film in public. Like I feel very used to doing that. And like I don't feel like people. I'm not thinking, is this person thinking I'm weird if I'm like clearly filming something for content? But I am thinking if I go up to someone and have a conversation with them, is this person think I'm weird because I'm like talking to them? IRL. Like that's literally, I feel crazy, but that's how I feel. And like I feel so more comfortable DMing someone that I don't know than I do like speaking to someone.
Yeah. Let's talk about with the flexible working thing and the whole and I did a whole thing on the Emma thing. So maybe I'll get you on another time. We'll unpack lots more of Emma Grede, whose book I've actually got literally just over there. But something that I heard somebody talk, if anybody actually does want to delve into the whole working from home thing, there was on Radio 4, which I listened to, obviously because I'm old. There's a program called You and Yours on Radio 4, which is like a phone-in program, and then they have an expert on the program, and they were talking about working from home. And there is a narrative, and this is something that I've wondered about when people are in their early careers, that whole like learning almost like through osmosis. And I know this is something that Emma Grede has talked about. I don't think she necessarily talked about it in that particular podcast that she did, but she sort of says, you know, when she was younger in her career, sort of just starting out in an agency, in a talent agency, she sat across from her boss. And, you know, everybody was like, why do you want to sit across from the boss? But she sat across from the boss and she said she would listen to the calls, like sales calls, for example. And if the sales call went well, she would write down what the boss had said. And then, you know, when the boss was like out the room, she would literally practice saying the same thing, maybe just tweak it a little bit, make it her own. And I just think that kind of like learning by osmosis from being in the same room is something that I wonder whether Gen Zers in particular have sort of missed out on quite a lot, just because a lot of culture has gone on to like sort of the sort of hybrid working. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Louise.
I think potentially, and obviously this isn't like a dunk on in person. Like personally, I love like
clearly,
I'm such so I love it. But I think there is a bit of that loss. But I also think if you look at, there's learning by osmosis, and then there's like, this might sound really weird, but then there's like learning on YouTube. Like the amount of like professional and personal development podcasts that are out there.
Yeah.
I mean, like even if you was thinking about Emma Grede, like she's selling a book tour on podcast. She wants people to learn from her from these like courses and podcasts.
Online.
So I think there's a lot to be said about like experiential learning in that way, but there's also a lot to be said by learning from like online, like how, like, if this again random example, like, but watching my dad put on like a spare tire versus watching it on YouTube, like I think equally I'd be able to learn and speak. You know what I mean? And my dad is now like, why are you coming to ask me? Obviously, I'll just send you the YouTube link and figure out.
I love that. Do you know what I think? And this conversation sort of demonstrates why it's really useful to have different perspectives, even like, you know, in the generations, and particularly, you know, and as we said about the whole digital thing and ways of connecting with people and consuming information in different ways. Because I think what you've sort of just proven in that this, even just this tiny little exchange, is there are different ways of, so the things that I've described as being, oh, people used to learn that by osmosis, you know, and I would sort of revert back to, oh, the only way that we can therefore achieve that is to get everybody back in, do you know, like that's the default. But actually your challenge is, well, okay, but what's the alternative? Like, let's get a bit creative. What is the alternative way to still making that learning happen, even when everybody isn't in the same place, so that, you know, Gen Zers and kind of early careers individuals aren't suffering. So yeah, it's really, you've got me thinking, Louise. You've really got me thinking. Maybe it's us boomers. I'm not a boomer, but I know that maybe it's us boomers that need to get a bit more creative about how the learning is passed on, basically, rather than assuming that the only way it can be done is if you know, is if somebody's literally sat next to you in the office.
Exactly. And I think there's also a time and a place. For example, I'm a big proponent of when you are doing different types of work that really encourage collaboration, then try and do those days in person. But when someone really is doing a task that they can do on their own and they might have a question, they can just Teams that person. Like, and really do that. Like, there's not that need.
Yeah.
And obviously, like it before, there just also wasn't the platforms to even have the option of online, which is why the default was, obviously we'll have everything in person. But now such sophisticated platforms, and also organizations using their own AI tools as well to kind of navigate the workplace, or like help their teams like understand the workplace through their own AI is a really interesting development as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm actually trying to get more to grips with the possibilities and also the constraints of Microsoft Copilot in terms of how it's now used in organizations. Because obviously, you know, I'd left the corporate space before Copilot came in. And obviously, so we as freelancers, we have access to Claude and ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini and all of that. But typically in the workplace, they've either got Gemini if they're on Google, or they've got Copilot. And I think, as you say, figuring out those tools and how to best use it, I think they're being massively underutilized at the moment. That's my sense. Sylvia, I think you've summed it up here. Learning is multidimensional and people absorb in different ways. And what I'm hearing from Louise is that different generations' ways of learning adapt with their reality. Absolutely. And what you were saying there, Louise, about, for example, if somebody's got a question, they can just team somebody. I'm not sure everybody's used to doing that. And I wonder whether that's, I spoke to a guy who is a founder. He's a young founder. He's a Gen Zer. He's like early 20s. I think he's now on like his second business. He's got 50 or 60 employees or something, and it's fully remote. So it's a remote first organization. They work on Discord. So Discord is where they all like speak to each other. Like, so, right. If you don't know what Discord is, you're probably of my generation. But they all work on Discord. But what he said is, he sort of said similar to, I think, what you've just sort of said about potentially just being able to team somebody if you've got a question. Because he said we have to stop thinking about the difference, or always thinking about the difference between physical and kind of almost like digital proximity. So he sort of said, you know, obviously through Discord, a bit like you were saying there, if somebody's got an immediate question, they will just like message somebody just straight away, like an instant message. But I almost think when we went into like COVID with Zoom and everything, we still have very formal ways of using that technology, as in it's like, let me book a call in with you to talk about, do you know what I mean? Rather than, so we've lost the informality. Yeah.
And I was even this is really funny. I was at like 30 under 30 co-working event last week, and we kind of got to the end, and there were two people there from I think they were Gen Xers, and we were talking about ways of communicating. Basically, we were all saying, the people who were in their 20s, we were basically saying how uncomfortable it is when someone, even in the workplace or a client or whatever, sends us a full stop at the end of a sentence that is meant to be a positive sentence. And how what we really would love is an X, right? We'd love a kiss at the end of it, to show that you actually have a positive thing to say. It's oh, thank you so much for this, obviously X. But if you said thank you so much for this, full stop, I'm you hate me, and you don't actually. And we were all most of them actually were in corporate settings as well, and they were it's really annoying because I really want to send a kiss to my manager, but I know I can't because it's unprofessional, but they're sending me a full stop, and I really just the miscommunication here that's happening.
That is hilarious. We're going to get onto that communication. Junior Beam's co-pilot, no pilot. Yeah, we need to figure out maybe co-pilot isn't the answer, but we definitely need to.
Apparently, Claude is where it's at. This is what everyone's saying to me. Claude is even though it's obviously
I use Claude a lot.
Yeah.
I use both. To be fair, I use Claude and ChatGPT, but I would say Copilot is more like ChatGPT. It's basically ChatGPT, I think, sitting underneath in a system. But let's talk about the communication thing, right? So Louise is saying that the Gen Zers would potentially actually feel offended if you put a full stop. It almost as though they're saying such period.
Yeah.
And that they may actually prefer an X at the end. I think putting an X at the end of sentences is going to get some people in trouble.
I know, and it's so weird, but it's generally the meaning of an X has changed.
Okay.
It's just a nice way of ending a text message or an email. Even an email, I'd happily get X's in an email. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think it's unprofessional in any way, shape, or form. I just think it's a nice way to end. Or even I'm just please just send me a smiley face, something to know that this is a good relationship.
That is so interesting. Smiley faces, emojis, and X. I ring people on Teams.
You're saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see you," or "Oh my gosh, I can't wait for this event," or "Really excited to work on you with this." In real life, you'd be smiling while you're saying it. You'd be "Can't wait to work with you on this." Stop. Deadpan face.
No expression, no emotion. So, okay, interesting. I can see people are starting to use emojis now in the comments. And I ring people on Teams. Generally, the response is no answer, and then a message, is everything okay? Maybe we just haven't figured out the tools, right? Maybe we just haven't figured out the tools. What's Yam said here? Scary thing is, this happens in real life too. Even close friends rarely just call anyone. I say this all the time. Just call me. I always put my phone number on emails. If you've got my phone number, just call me. Even if we haven't arranged a call, if we haven't scheduled, just call. I might actually just answer. The reality is most of the time my phone is on silent. But ignoring that, scary thing is, even friends, even close friends. That's so true. Yeah, I've noticed that. I've got a friend of mine actually. We were messaging yesterday, and I thought I just need to just call her. But in my mind, I was like, okay, I'll wait. I'll schedule it. But we need to just be more spontaneous. Might just be they don't call me. I don't think it's just you, for sure. And then sorry, with lots of X's. Sorry, period.
Sorry, full stop. I glazed over the full stop of my
So would you say that then that are you saying that Gen Zers, and obviously we're generalizing a little bit, but are you saying that there's maybe an expectation of more emotion in written form? Yeah. It's interesting because my daughter's a Gen Zer, for anybody that didn't hear. She said about I think it was during COVID, she heard something. I think it was some teachers were being interviewed or something, and they were talking about school children writing with lots more emojis, like it just like becoming the norm, and almost like the teachers being worried because these children are writing with emojis. So for those of us that aren't of the emoji generation, although saying that, my mom, who I think my mom is a boomer, uses loads of emojis. Like it's almost like the whole message, right? So it's interesting to say maybe we're the ones in the minority that are kind of more formal, you know, with the full stops. Emojis are fine. X is a HR case waiting to happen in some.
Yeah, like fine. If you're sending like, yeah, maybe don't send someone like highs or like, you know, hot. Maybe that's a bit much, but
yeah.
You know what? Maybe the middle ground is just a quick smiley face, you know.
Yeah, or even just like a what is it? Like a colon and a bracket for a smiley face, right? If you don't like the yellow face, with the yellow emoji, maybe just literally, yeah. I it's interesting. I mean, when I thought about the whole communication thing as well, but I love your thing about is there any emotion in this, which. It's honestly, this conversation is blowing my mind because it's really making me think very differently. And when I go back to my Substack, which I was just writing, it's going to have a little bit of this in it, because I think there is something about you know, when you put emotion or an X in something, or you're trying to convey how you're feeling through how you write, right, in the written form. Whereas, yeah, for some of us, certainly in a work context, and when I talk about communication, I was thinking things like, for example, I know that when it comes to, say, if somebody's going to be off work, say, if somebody gets a text, some people think that to text somebody is kind of like unfair, you know, is that an accepted form of contact? You know what I mean? And so there is something about the informality, but I think the point that you're making here almost, which is more about connection and how we convey how we're feeling through writing, is really interesting. I used to have a boss, it was CEO many years ago. He couldn't stand it when somebody would start an email with the word hi, which I do all the time. I mean, I sometimes start an email with hey.
Yeah, same.
But he didn't like hi. He felt it was too informal for the workplace. It's so interesting, isn't it? How times change, right?
But again, like if you were at work in the office,
yeah,
you would say, "Oh, hi, how are you?" Like you.
Yeah.
That's not informal, but apparently on an email,
Yeah.
and I think that's where the.
It's so interesting. Yeah. Maybe, you know, and I'm sort of thinking maybe Jen said it's not the problem. Maybe it's us.
But I was speaking to again, and like someone I work with quite a bit, and I straight away, because she would do full stops, and I'm like, Julia, like why? I don't like, because I'm like, I'll literally be in a meeting with her, and then she'll send me something after, and I'm like, I don't get it. Like, are we like, is there bad vibes?
Are you the same person? Like, yeah.
I'm like, but it's my way of communicating.
Yeah, I tell you what, Louise, you're going to start to make me really self-conscious now, because my writing is relatively formal. But I mean, some of that is my background's at EY, right? So chartered, you know, professional services background. So you're kind of almost, a lot of us of my generation, right? We've been taught to be very like emotionless. In fact, I remember when I was your age. No, when I was like in my early 30s, I remember a manager. I'd written something, I can't remember what it was, some sort of like a summary paper or a business case or something. And my boss at the time said to me, "We're finance, we don't have a sense of humor." He was totally serious when he said that. Yeah. So it links to the whole authenticity thing as well. There is just something about, I think that we have been taught, like older generations have been taught, you know, that when you come to work, it's work, and it's, you know, and there is this version of what professional looks like and all of that. And it just feels like Gen Z have come in and, like, I don't want to say torn up the rule book, but Gen Z and also the environment is kind of challenging it, right? Yeah.
What you look like, sorry, the thought of wearing heels or anything that's a platform to into an office makes me feel physically ill. Like, why? Like, why? And actually, I do think I think we brought that. I think we brought the idea of being able to wear trainers to work and make it. I think we made that more acceptable. Maybe it was millennials. I don't know.
I agree with that. So you heard it here first. Louise said the thought of wearing a heel into work makes her feel physically sick. Okay. Yes, I think that I think trainers, and certainly the only thing I would say though, I wonder, is it a specific brand of trainer? Because I tell you what, so my daughter, who is a Gen Zer, for those that didn't hear, I think it's either Adidas Sambas or Gazelles or something like that's almost like become the heel of the Gen Zer. Like that's what they wear, right? That they,
or like Air Force, or like plain Air Force shoes, and there is a specific type of trainer that's more acceptable. Like if you came in running shoes, people would be like, oh, so
they'd be okay boomer, because it'd probably be like somebody like my sort of age that would be like my Hockers or something. Okay, so there is something about, and this has been so interesting. I mean, I hope what people are getting from this is, we're sort of talking about generalizations, but I think there is something about challenging the way that we work. I do think the whole like authenticity thing, I think, for me, I certainly think that Gen Z challenges all of us to bring more of ourselves to work. And I think especially around like what I'd sort of call the bad behaviors, right? Like poor behaviors. I feel like Gen Z are like, I'm not putting up with that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't have to take that. And the reality is that none of us should ever have had to take some of the behaviors, right, that were sort of like tolerated in work, alter egos at work, in person versus email. It's weird, isn't it? But the fact that we have that, and we're
Sylvia, that is literally like, if we're talking about workplace TikTok, the amount of like TikToks I can see in my head with that sort of caption, it's just
really
relate to that so much.
Yeah, that you have to like put on like a different thing at work. Yeah. So we, one of the things that I'm taking away from this is we need to like embrace the like the authenticity. But yeah, it's that's my one biggest takeaway is that Gen Z challenges other generations to be more authentic and to be themselves in person and on email, as long as you're clear, right? As long as you're being absolutely clear, which links back to the first thing that you said like the top thing. And I know I'm like getting you to like reveal some of the findings of your research when it comes out, but you said one of the top things that Gen Z want is clear expectations, right? Or clear instructions, I think you said.
Yeah, clear
at work. Yeah. Really, really important. What about intersectionality in Gen Z? So we haven't talked about this. We have sort of like generalized a little bit. What about those people that maybe don't fit the stereotypes? So maybe those people that aren't wearing the Adidas, the Sambas, or the Gazelles, or the Air Forces. So, Gen Z is like a whole range, right? So how do organizations, I guess, sort of tap into understanding and like creating space for Gen Z, however they show up, right?
Yeah, I think it's about having kind of like, it's almost like if you're in a workshop and you like contract with people, right? At the beginning of the workshop, you're like, how do we make this a safe as space as possible for everyone in this room, right?
Yeah.
And we might have the thing is, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we understand that we need guidelines or rules for this space, right? But what we're saying is that we're getting that from everyone, right? And so the more you ask people what they need, and those needs are going to be different, the more you can understand how to create different solutions for different people. And obviously, with having like EAP in the workplace and giving people more options, like I was speaking, my partner was like, I don't know, a random time where he was getting lots of like job offers, and he was looking at the different perks of the workplace. And one of the places was like, he was like, honestly, this EAP situation was insane. Like they gave you vouchers for like loads of different options for whatever it was you wanted, so that would help you as a specific individual with whatever you thrive. And like he was just listing all of these perks off. But it was very much like you have your, like they give you the kind of credit for it or whatever, and then you get to choose out those options.
Yeah.
I think it really is the optionality of it, but also understanding different problems that different communities might be facing. Like, I've been also doing more research into like how global majority Gen Z are kind of more negatively impacted by some of the problems that we're seeing, like the cost of living crisis, generally like progression within the workplace, and how that links to kind of discrimination. And so they're going to kind of need different support than other people who might not be experiencing those kind of different levels of discrimination. So I think it's about understanding, again, the different problems that your employees are facing, and then trying to think up those different solutions, which is why there are so many amazing programs and organizations of people trying to kind of work on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, some really good things there. And this is where I like, I know some organizations have like early careers like ERGs and employee networks and things like that, so that you can signpost and really sort of focus on like the different needs of different individuals. Because as you say, often the experiences can be quite different depending on other elements of identity and lived experience. Really good question here from Jill about the bad behaviors. And for anybody that didn't hear, I was talking about, because I've been really going down the rabbit hole of The Devil Wears Prada, right? The Devil Wears Prada, with the second film being out, and talking about things like bad behaviors, and specifically, and I'm umming and ahhing about whether to really go in on this, but specifically leadership styles that are quite problematic, clearly. And some of this is because I used to have a boss that we used to call Miranda Priestley.
Oh my, wow.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode that I'll maybe do at some point, right? And we everybody loves the film and we find it funny and the fashion and all that, but when you really dissect the leadership, when you find out more about how close actually some of those behaviors were to reality, you're like, wow, that really was problematic. Jill's question here, though, is there a risk for young people now that they feel they do not need to put up with bad behavior? So thinking on the recent reports on the high levels of NEET, and NEET standing for not in employment, educational training, amongst the under 25s. So do you think, I guess that goes to that point of, Louise, do you think it's a problem if young people, if Gen Zers, for example, aren't tolerant of any sort of like level of, I don't want to say challenge because that's not the right word, but yeah, I guess it is bad behaviors, often coming from leaders of my sort of generation and older, like, let's be honest about it, who themselves have come up in fairly what we would almost call now toxic work environments. So some of them still use the same management style. So yeah, what's the issue there for young people then, do you think?
Yeah, I do think there's a risk, and even not just with the bad behaviors, but also like I've seen lots of young people, and I literally know someone who's tried to create an organization based off this problem of like, I think with Gen Z, there's a lot to say about how the internet has allowed people to kind of pursue different side hustles and be kind of allow themselves to be more creative or entrepreneurial. I've seen a lot of people be kind of rejected from jobs because they're showing too much kind of creativity or like kind of thinking of their own ideas, and it's a bit like, that seems like a problem because it doesn't feel like you're going to conform necessarily, or like this place isn't for you. And I think that's really bad to see, because again, actually that person is more likely to be an asset. And the same thing with the bad behaviors. Again, if someone is not willing to put up with negative behavior or wants to create a more positive work environment for everyone else, then I think that's a good thing. That's someone who's an asset to your team, especially if they're going to speak up about it. Because at the end of the day, like, you have the silent majority who all, right, and this isn't just the workplace, this is a problem for culture, right? Because if you're really stressed at work because your boss was screaming at you for something and something wasn't getting done and you're being frustrated about it, you're just going to go home and project that onto whoever it is that you live with, or like your friends or whatever it is, and you're just going to like, it's just going to spill over into other parts of your life. And then generally you see that people are going to be more burnt out or just having like more problems. And what we don't want to see is that also trickling down, so that, again, I was having a conversation, and even people close to me are talking about this idea of like, okay, well, it's almost like university and like freshers, like the idea that, okay, well, you were treated like this and you had to do this, this, and this. So now when it comes to you having any sort of power or any sort of managerial responsibilities, then you kind of just project that on the kind of next cohort of people that you're looking after. And then it's kind of just a cycle. And what we want to get to is actually breaking that cycle completely, because we don't want this situation where people are just not talking about how they feel, they're repressing everything, and the toxicity kind of just explodes into like, again, what HR have to deal with is really serious problems, really, like sometimes problems that can like expand out of the workplace, and then you have lawsuits and whatever it is, because people are being seriously like discriminated against.
Absolutely.
Behaviors aren't being challenged at the root.
Yeah, I'd liken it to I just want to put Jill's comment up again. Jill, I'd probably liken it to, you know, like I would say like 10, 20 years ago, the level of like I'm going to call it, and I don't want to diminish any of this, but the low grade sexual harassment that was just like commonplace in it at like management conferences or, you know, work dues or anything like that. That was like the norm. Like 10 years ago, Eve, 10 years ago was just the norm. And so the question could almost be, I could almost rephrase this question to say, is there a risk for women if they don't feel that they need to put up with low-grade sexual harassment? But we wouldn't ask that question because we've now all pretty much mostly moved to a point where we said, actually, sexual harassment is wrong generally. So let's not put the onus on the women to tolerate it. And I think it's the same with the poor behaviors in the workplace. I think, you know, as you said, Louise, let's just address it. Let's maybe just recognize that the hangover, the legacy that we've got of these poor behaviors. And I was thinking back, you know, the whole Devil Wears Prada. I was thinking back to some of the things I saw earlier in my career in my 20s. I mean, I have seen managing directors, not in EY where I worked, but when I used to go out to clients, I've seen managing directors throw things at people, scream and bawl at people, like, and this was in glass offices that everybody could see into. Like, it is wild. I mean, you know, the film, what's the film? The financial services film, I can't remember the crazy one where they're all like doing drugs and, you know, throwing people around the offices and whatever.
All I can think of is Industry, the show.
It's no, I can't remember which one it is. It's one of my daughter's favorite films. But apparently, it's the one that was based on the true story.
Wall Street.
Yes, Wolf of Wall Street. Apparently, he's Jordan, whatever his name, Jordan Byfield, is it? He said that those parties and things that they showed were worse in real life. Like, can you actually imagine? Like, so there is an element of some of these poor behaviors. Literally, just somebody needs to break the cycle. Somebody needs to like grow a pair. That in itself is completely sexist, and basically say, like, we need to stop some of these things, right? Some of these things, they're not, that just because they've been happening, you know, that doesn't mean that they're the right thing. Interesting that young employees are getting rejected for being too creative. With AI taking over the workplace, creativity will probably be the top differentiator in the workplace. Absolutely. My concern is that we could go backwards if unemployment rises. I think that's, I see what you mean, Jill, in terms of, you know, if we don't get Gen Z in the workplace in the first place to then challenge these things, do we just end up with, it's a tricky one. No obvious answers to that, no silver bullets. What's one thing we're going to wrap up? I'm trying to like finish these things before the 60-minute mark. What is one thing that organizations can do, Louise, to build workplaces where Gen Z can thrive?
Listen to their concerns and then action, whatever it is you can within your capacity. And when it comes to creating a better culture, make sure it's collaborative.
Absolutely. Listen, collaborate with them to create improvements where you can. Absolutely. Louise, where can people find out? Well, when are the survey results and all of that coming out, and where can people find out more about the work and connect with you?
So if you're free on the 23rd of June, I'm going to be hosting an event where we're going to launch kind of the overview of the insights that we've gathered from the survey. But then after that, I will be posting it on LinkedIn. So connect with me on LinkedIn. And also I can send out the invite to you as well. But otherwise, you can find more information about Synkora Consulting at synkoraconsulting.com.
Amazing. And if you're DMing Louise, remember to include an X, not a full stop.
Exactly.
Louise, thank you so much for jumping on. I've really enjoyed it, and I feel like not only have I learned a lot, which I always do with these conversations, but I feel like it's really challenged some of my sort of preconceptions, and I think it's even challenged maybe the way that I will interact and the way that I would recommend clients interact.
Next time we talk, Cheryl, I'll be expecting answers.
Absolutely, yeah. Or at least a smiley face.
Yeah.
Not full stop. Louise, thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting, and I hope everybody got something from it as well. I think, it's just been really, really refreshing to look at all of this, communication, hybrid working, and all of that through a Gen Z perspective. And I cannot wait for the research to come out. Honestly, I really can't wait for it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody that has been with us from the start. And if you're watching this on the replay, thank you for taking 1 hour and 58 seconds out of your day to enjoy this. And we'll see you next time. Take